All right, so this is going to be very fitting because of my chess, sort of how often I play chess, but it could be any game. So, what this is going to be is an ambassador from outer space comes, an alien race that is far more advanced than our own, and he comes by himself. This is kind of an important introductory distinction. So, let's go. Actually, I should name it like the intro. What would it be? Like a quiet arrival. You can almost look at it like a Raditz arrival, where he's not from Dragon Ball Z, where he arrives in a pod by himself. He doesn't have any entourage. He doesn't have any guards or fancy technology. Let's see what the quality of this actually is. Far more advanced. Some of this is good. So he arrives, oh my god. He arrives quietly, peacefully, by himself. And so you're only going to see this one. Why is it back up at the top? You're only going to see this one being the whole time. The reason why I like to have this up on screen, like why I like to type it, is so that either people can see it, but also just for myself so I can keep track of what I've said and what's been discussed so far, because then it gets way too hard as you go on. So he arrives in seeming like a modest way, not ostentatious. His ship maybe is impressive, but nothing beyond that. You can almost think of it in the context of like a movie too. Like you could imagine how it would look. So he arrives, and at first maybe people are skeptical. They don't really take him seriously. They don't feel threatened. So then he puts on some sort of major display. So the first event so far is the arrival. He arrives by himself in a pod, nothing too fancy, seems simple enough, right? He seems very ordinary almost. Nothing threatening, nothing intimidating. His appearance is plain almost. Then he makes his proposition, or at first people are skeptical, so he has to prove his sort of power and his worth. So then let's say he has direct contact to his race and he has a certain amount of authority where he can make things happen. So this isn't just any ordinary individual. So he's able to, let's say, blow up Pluto, something far away, so that it doesn't actually damage the planet like Earth or cause any major problem, but it demonstrates that we have to stay in line and do what he says. So he establishes the power of the threat there. Then this will be like his only lone display of their power. He won't do anything else for the rest of the story. He just does one thing at the beginning so that people respect him and the authority of this race, so then they let it be. Then they go along with it from that point on and stay in line. And so there could be some back and forth at the beginning where, like, you know, people are mocking him. He would meet somebody of some level of authority, and people aren't taking him adequately seriously. So he's forced to show his hand and to prove himself. Then once he does that, this is going to be all over the place with the speech to text, but I'll just try it anyway. It'll at least get some of it. So first major event, arrival. Then he proves himself. He destroys, again, let's say Pluto. Maybe there's some scientific, I would have to do research into it, reason why if you blew up Pluto, it would also cause the Earth to, within 50 years, it'll be uninhabitable too, by some process that I don't understand. But generally, we'll just do that. I was going to say Saturn or Jupiter or something, but then the problem with that is it's so big that it might end up having debris and asteroids come. And so again, his point is only to prove his power or his race's power, not to actually damage or threaten the Earth itself, because they might have other plans for it too in terms of resources and whatnot. So I should say too at the beginning, like, some of the inspirations for this would be like Signs, M. Night Shyamalan, one of my favorite movies, or like just even The Twilight Zone. There'll be elements of that where it's like a test, ordinary sort of, well, I guess not ordinary people, but just how does this extraordinary event change people and test people and reveal things that they're capable of or tendencies that they have. And so Signs, Twilight Zone, maybe Contact a little bit, where it's sort of a test of faith. Some people will use it to reinforce their faith. Some people will use it to sort of disregard their faith, right? Like great movie with Jodie Foster where she, you kind of see that scene early on. Once it's confirmed, like, oh, we had contact with aliens, He at least got Jodie Foster right. So some people denounce their faith, like, oh, this proves it's not true. Some people use it. Basically, it shows you it's a mirror to the self. It's not really about the event that they're concerned. People will use things however they want to make whatever point or prove to themselves whatever they want to believe. And so it'd be the same thing here. So as far as like major characters, the game itself will be proposed at this point. So far, this, we'll call him the ambassador. At this point, he did the threat, so now everybody stay in line and have their eyebrows raised. So you might think, okay, he has no bodyguards, he has limited technology, it's not anything crazy. It's sort of like the argument, we'll use signs as an example. They seem to have trouble with pantry doors that everybody makes fun of. But the underlying implication there is he's just an ordinary being, but he belongs to a race that is so technologically advanced, more so than people. So even individual people, right, would seem primitive. You can be locked in a cell. You would struggle to get out of a confined area, right? In and of yourself, your state seems primitive, but your collective technological capability is far greater. So it's the same case in his instance, which will be slowly revealed, and maybe we'll touch on that later. But the core point is, individually, he's not that impressive. He's just one being, but he represents this sort of group that has such extreme technology. So it would be the same, again, in the instance of a person. Our collective capability is we could nuclear bomb a country, or we could nuclear bomb, and create so much havoc and damage. We can send people into space, this and that, but we aren't able to do that's not reflected in our individual capabilities. We just have our own physical limits. So once he proves that element of power, this is going to be hilarious to read back. I'm going to have to find a better program for this, but I'm just practicing with it today. So he's proven his capability. Now he presents the proposition, which is, okay, we are going to play a game of chess. And again, that could be substituted for any other game or form of competition, but it's almost like Space Jam, play a game of basketball with aliens, and if you lose, you get destroyed or whatever. So there's an alternate premise that I could put here, but that's not the one I'm actually going to go with, but I'll just float the idea. So like, I'll call it race X of aliens, race Y of aliens, and then Earth. So in that case, race X would be even more powerful than both of us. So Y and Earth would be equal, and then X would be even more powerful. So they would set up the match between Y and Earth to sort of as it'll be like a Cold War arms race sort of a thing, to see which one can come up with a better algorithm to play chess perfectly, right, to solve the game. This is almost me poking fun at that aspect too, where people always get mad if you say it's solved, or it could be solved, or they take it as like an insult to the game itself. So it wouldn't be people who are actually playing it. It would be a test of your technology in a way. And there's an underlying motivation as to why that is, but I'll get to that later. So far, that could be an alternate premise, just so one far superior technological race is testing the two lessers to see which could be more useful to them, or who can get the goal done first. Right, so it'll be a game between the two. So if Y and Earth, whichever one loses gets destroyed or enslaved, the other one gets to join like their federation of galactic trade or whatever, and still get taxed by them. That's the reward, because they're still in a position of power over you, but it's still a better fate. Or it could be like one's destroyed, one's enslaved, something like that. So it would be pushing them to their limits. Now, getting back to the actual premises, it's just this one race external, where this ambassador is representing them, and he's putting this toward the Earth. So he's saying, okay, you have like a month to prepare your best technology, your best algorithm to be able to solve the game of chess, or to put up the best fight against us. And if you beat us, we'll let you live. If you lose, we'll enslave you or kill you. So you might think, well, if this race in terms of Earth was capable of doing that, they would have already done it. But for them, it's just a game, and they've been complacent their whole existence. So they've never sort of been pushed to achieve their full potential. It's like a potential acme argument. I've discussed this before in previous, like in the redefining term segment and stuff, where this would be the belief of the ambassador, where he goes deep into sort of human psychology. Just the fact that they've never achieved their true potential acme in anything because they've never been pushed to, they've never been forced to, they've always had a certain level of comfort. So here, now their entire existence is being threatened, so it doesn't matter what they're putting that potential into. It's sort of like he wants an example. This is the reason behind the test and the game, right? Which wouldn't be super obvious to people right away, but it slowly gets revealed throughout the story. The fact is, what was that Q sort of thing we sent into space? What was it called? We sent something into space with human anatomy and whatnot on it. It was like a capsule. What was it called? In the beacon in the galaxy. Is that what it was? Yeah, like the Voyager. So it's the same sort of concept, right? If we could send one thing, oh my God. If we could send one thing or have one example of our total collective human achievement and capability technologically, what would it be? So here we're sort of supplanting, okay, the game of chess and your ability to solve it, but it could be, again, anything else. You can replace it if you want. People will poke holes like, oh, haha, we've already solved it, or we're so close that it wouldn't be much of a challenge. So you could have this take place 20 years ago, or, early 2000 is when it was less of a established thing. But in any case, it would be sort of a technological arms race where you're trying to get there as quickly as possible. And it sort of goes along with my theory of, if it was really a priority, like if every government in the world or every military in the world made it their sole priority to solve it, they could have it solved by tomorrow morning with trillions of dollars and resources and supercomputers put in. The amount that is still put in is impressive, like with Stockfish and whatnot, engines, but it would be a case where I like how I'm using chess this way, but if it was really the number one priority of the world, it might be solved by tomorrow, but it's still millions are pumped into it and it's still a priority. It's a different level when it becomes sort of this matter of life and death. So it's testing that total capacity of our technology and ability in one sort of encapsulated event. So that would be the representation of why he's doing this test to begin with. So the gauntlet is thrown, he lets it be, and so he says you have a month, or it could be a shorter span of time, maybe even a week, to pool all your resources, intelligence, knowledge, show us what you're capable of. He wouldn't really say it like that because he wants it to seem like, oh, it's just a game. It's almost like Seventh Seal. Oh, that's another inspiration. So Signed, Seventh Seal, and Twilight Zone, where each element would be present. Sort of Signs, just how you see very little of them. You're only going to see the ambassador. You won't see any other ones ever, right? You might have some contact back and forth, and it'll be sort of like a game within a game from like the Seventh Seal, where it starts off, Antonius Block is a knight, and he's playing chess with death, basically, the Grim Reaper. And so if he loses, he dies. If he wins, he survives. But it's not simply a game of chess, because they'll make a move, then they'll do something, then they'll make another move, they'll pick up their game somewhere else, right, later. And so at one point in the story, Death poses as like a clergyman, and Antonius is confessing to him. And during that conversation, he's like, oh, he admits to what's going on, like, I'm playing chess with Death. And he uses that to sort of probe his strategy. Oh, there's this bishop flank that he's missing, and then he turns and reveals, oh, it's actually him. So that's sort of the game theory, game within a game, where even outside of the game of chess, him posing like that and sort of getting that one up is part of the game for them, right? That he was able to figure out his next move by tricking him that way. So here you would have maybe some line of communication back to the sort of overlord race that we're looking at, and so who's putting this test to us. And so in that sense, we would be trying to probe for more information about them. They would be trying to probe us for what our real capabilities and weaknesses are, or sort of fleshing out our potential. Not that they feel threatened by us in any way. Oh, but there could be a cool See, I don't like to take notes before I do this or anything. It's all just kind of in my head, whatever I come up with, and then I like to improvise it as I go along. So I didn't write anything down before this. But this could be a kind of a cool moment. He would see, upon coming in, he's going to have sort of like a sarcastic or condescending mentality towards people. He'll constantly poke at human nature and all negative tendencies. And so he's sort of sent there as an observer to assess, what is their value to us? Are they really worth? And I guess that goes along with, how would they even know about chess? So the conversation there would be like, okay, it'd be like twofold. He would present the proposition, and then somebody would suggest, okay, why not picture it like a government board or some sort of NATO, whatever, like the whole, every powerful leader in the world together in a room with him discussing this event, right? He requests, after destroying Pluto, to show his power, keep everybody in line. He's like, I request a summit, let's meet, and I'll discuss what our intention is. And of course, they have no choice but to comply, because the same thing would happen to Earth, would be the sort of outcome, right? So in that sense, you have the summit, right? The power is proven, the arrival is done, and so now you're at a situation where he presents a challenge, and then a bunch of these people will question, okay, why don't we just have our best chess players, like at this point Bobby Fischer or Gary Kasparov? I won't do it in modern times then, like Magnus Carlsen or whatever. So we have one of those. Why don't we have our best player play against your best player? But then to this, the ambassador would respond, oh, we don't play chess. We only discovered what it is, right, watching you. We had some sort of way that we kept an eye on you and monitored things about the Earth without you knowing. Somehow with their technology, they were able to do that before they actually got here themselves. And of course, this ambassador is the first one, at least known to have arrived here. So they learned about the game, they used their vastly superior technology to easily solve it, let's say, for example, or to be far superior at it with us. So they'll let their technology do it for them. So it's their technology versus our technology. So it would sort of supplant the human ability to do it. It's like, why is it even impressive? It would touch on this point. If you could make a robot that plays sports better than people, like Detroit kind of explores that idea a little bit, why would it even matter? Why is it impressive that it's like an ego thing for people? Oh, well, they do it better within their limitations, within human limitations, so that's impressive to us. But a computer or technology could do it far better. So why does it even matter? It's not about the ability at the act itself. It's somehow about pushing your own limitations. So in this case, it's all about pure meritocracy and ability. So it wouldn't be a test of people's ability to play it. It would be a test of their ability to design technology for it to be able to do it for us, right? Like an algorithm that's capable of playing it at a level that we're never going to be capable of, or at least we wouldn't be within that short a span of time. And I think this, I'm not even looking at what the text is at this point. I'll just let it be what it is. But I'll imagine a speech to text that was actually accurate. I'll have to find one. I didn't realize it would be this bad. This speech to text sucks. Will it get that line right at least? Let's see what it said. Bad disk FIFA text stocks. What the fuck am I looking at? Okay, let me go over the major events so far. So first you have the arrival, very quiet, non-ostentatious. He arrives alone in a single pod, no bodyguards, no entourage, none of that. And then he somehow proves an ambassador from the superior alien race, technologically at least, and then he somehow broadcasts a message or gets people's attention. At first, they're very skeptical, so then he's pushed to prove himself. And again, he does have a certain amount of authority to be able to do these things, or it's all part of their plan, so, you know, he can show his power at any time. So he destroys Pluto, let's say, as an example, keeps people in line, declares the summit. So he has a meeting with, let's say, all-powerful world leaders. So at this point, the gauntlet is thrown. He requests So those could each be chapters. The arrival, mysterious. Why is he just by himself? What's he up to? Why does he seem so simple and unimpressive? Then the second one would be like sort of his initial broadcast or appearance, people being skeptical, testing their faith. Some people believe it, some don't, some are in despair about it. Line from Signs, like, could be bad, could be good. Like when Mel Gibson's talking about the invasion. Some people would see it as a sign of something good. Some people would deify him. There'll be an undercurrent of that. Like, they almost treat this guy as a god because they don't see the rest of the race at all, or any of their technology or anything. It's just him the whole time. And they can't touch him because, of course, the power is in the threat. See, there'll be a scene somewhere in here where it almost makes me think of Beerus a little bit from Dragon Ball Super, but it's a little bit different in the sense that Beerus is so strong in that story. In this, he's not strong at all. He's like an ordinary, mortal, simple person, being, but again, he has the power behind him. So they know, so you could just walk up to him and shoot him with a gun and that would kill him, let's say, right? Just because their technology is superior doesn't mean they're superior physically. You could make like a biosuit argument, like, oh, maybe by then they'll turn themselves into super beings with technology, or at the very least, they should do that with an ambassador who's going to go to an alien planet, right? A lot of those kind of plot holes that happen in these stories, like with Signs, that's the biggest complaint people have, where shouldn't they know that their weakness is water? Shouldn't they have planned for that sort of a thing? They should have biosuits, this and that. It's not just like their bare skin that they're coming in with. Like, we don't go to the moon with bare skin. But I think they try to explain that, like, oh, it's reconnaissance. It's not actually the bulk of them coming. They're just seeing if it's suitable for the rest of them. But whatever. The point being that he is just an ordinary being that you could easily kill. The only reason you can't is because of the threat and the strength behind him. That, you know, if you did that, okay, they'll just blow up the Earth just as easily as they blew up Pluto at that point, where he proved himself. Proved the power of his race. So there'll be a scene in there, right? Everybody's on pins and needles, and sort of, you don't want to upset him, you don't want to say the wrong thing. You're treating him, again, almost like a god. And so you don't want to say the wrong thing, you don't want to offend him, you don't want to, oh, don't accidentally spill that coffee on him, don't accidentally, you know, give him a paper cut, anything. Of course, you wouldn't know necessarily that he's that weak that could happen. So there would be an event that would happen, sort of like he's looking over a document and he cuts himself. So this would show to the audience and to the people, like, oh, he's not really a god. He's not really super powerful. We could just kill him. He bleeds like the rest of us. He's just weak like the rest of us. But we still can't touch him. But there would be some humanizing element. And of course, everybody would be freaking out, like, but because he did it to himself, or it doesn't really bother him, but it does kind of expose his mortality. So that's an important moment, both, again, the pins and needles aspect, that everybody's freaking out and trying not to offend or upset him in any way, or obviously to hurt him. And on the other side, it's sort of, again, it shows you how simple it is. So his only confidence that nobody's going to just kill him or capture him is the threat. It's, again, no bodyguards, nothing like that around. No technology, really. Like, he has basic, maybe, paraphernalia on him, but it's not like he can outfight military or anything like that by himself. He's not like super powerful. He's not a Super Saiyan or Superman or anything like that. There's no such aspect to this. So now he throws the gauntlet in this committee meeting, right? He gives himself a paper cut. So it's a twofold revelation. And so he's hiding behind the fact of the power in the threat. And what was the other scene? Okay, he could see during the second chapter where it's sort of the people are skeptical and all this. He's going to play this role throughout the story to observe people and sort of point out their hypocrisies and stupidity and weakness. So he would see someone with a sign that says, like, save the planet. And so he has a moment of shock here and he's worried. He's like, wait a second. Save the planet. It's like they knew we were coming. They already had that sign prepared. They don't even know I'm here yet. So how come they're saying save the planet? It must be from us. So maybe they're not as stupid and incapable as we think. So he's a little bit worried. Maybe this is just they're baiting us in and they know about us and they have superior technology. They just want to make it seem like they don't, so that we come in and do something like this and they're actually playing us when we think we're playing them. But in reality, no. Then he realizes, oh, it's actually referring to environmentalism and save the planet from global warming and that sort of thing. So then he breathes a sigh of relief. He thought it was some deeper level understanding that they had where, oh, all their technology is underground in a bunker and they're just hiding it from us and we never notice. But no, he realizes, okay, so they're actually referring to that. And so then he goes on sort of this deeper understanding of how arrogant people are. Like, oh, we just destroyed a planet, or he's about to destroy a planet. We destroy planets like it's nothing. But you don't have the technology to do that. You couldn't destroy a planet even if you tried, your own planet. So really what you mean to say is you're saying save yourself, save your own ability to inhabit it. You could shoot all of the nuclear bombs you have in your total capacity, and it still wouldn't be enough to destroy the planet. It would still be there, but you wouldn't. It would become uninhabitable for you, right? We've seen things that planets have been through that you couldn't imagine over eons and billions of years. Your planet has been through so much. Don't be so conceited that you think you even could destroy it if you wanted to. So that's not really what you mean. So he's pointing out sort of the arrogance and hubris of mankind there. You couldn't destroy it if you wanted to. What you really mean is just your own self-interest. You want to save yourselves from your own gluttonous tendencies, sucking the planet dry, but at the same time acting like you're doing something noble by saving it. When again, you couldn't destroy it even if you wanted to, but we can. That would be sort of the... But he wouldn't really say this to anyone. He would say this to himself just for the benefit of the audience. And it would be like a shocking moment at first. You'll see a little bit of fear in him when he sees it. Like, wait a second. It's almost like they knew we were coming. Save the planet from us, you must mean. How did they know this was going to happen? And then he realizes, oh no, it's actually referring to something stupid, like within his perspective at least. So that's another reinforcement that they're just an inferior species. That they would be concerned with something that is their own zero-sum self-interest that they can't even adequately manage. So that would be a nice little scene there. And again, he's going to keep observing things in society that he's going to either take issue with or use to reinforce. And he's sort of doing that to assess also the quality of the species. Like, what use will he have for them? Is he going to put their technology to use? Is he just going to eradicate them? Is he going to just sort of dig deeper into their psyche and see what purpose he can find for them? Are they actually going to be worth the effort? So that's part of the reason why he's doing this whole test. If they can live up to the algorithm, like, oh wow, they can understand the game as well as we can with our technology, or have it be played at an equal level, that means that, okay, maybe they are worthy of keeping around in some manner of speaking. If they can, then it's a waste of time. So again, not to get caught up on the game itself, it could be any example of collective technological capability encapsulated in that one display. The real purpose is just to say, like, it's a technology measurement sort of standard. They would use this as a test, a game of their own creation, or again, like our own creation, like chess, just to say, like, okay, let's use that to test their technological capabilities. If it reaches a certain standard, like, again, being able to beat us or match our standard, then they're worthy. If not, then they're not worthy, that kind of a thing. Could be a threat assessment level too, that they could do with any species they come up against. Let's do this to test them, and then we'll see how capable they really are when their potential is reached, the potential acme, as I was calling it. So he does that. Again, the paper cup moment can happen in the committee. And so he's going to have a strong presence still in the story, but now you would focus more on human characters. You could have the chess grandmaster who's training, who thinks that he's going to do it himself, and he'll be good enough, so he pushes his limits and is kind of battling against the sort of realization that no matter what he does, he's never going to be as good as technology and algorithms and stuff like that, and sort of the engine. So he has like a personal issue. That could be like a major character who's sort of fooling himself into thinking that he's going to be the one to play the game against their superior technology. You can have one of the people working on the project that is going to enable sort of us to try and beat them. So he'll be making a lot of these observations about human flaw, not in a hateful way, because he has no care one way or another, but in again, either a diminutive aggression, I would call it, or sort of just condescending. And he's assessing. He's almost disappointed, like, oh, we can't make adequate use of you because you have so many flaws. We're trying to herd you like sheep. We're trying to use you like animals, but you're not even worthy of that. You're just such a burden to even worry about. And then okay, so one of the characters could again be the Grandmaster who's fooling himself into thinking he's going to be useful here. One of them could be a leader who's sort of conflicted on what to do of like a country. One of them could be like all the people in the committee could have some significance who meet with him. One of them could be like a press at CNN. One of them could be like a press agent who is trying to sort of conflicted as to whether to tell the mass public about this or not. So that kind of goes against the earlier point of people being skeptical of him. How would he reveal himself without letting the vast majority of people know? But anyway, there could be a press agent character who either wants to spill the beans or is trying to cover things up so that people don't panic and things like that. And then maybe a military person high up who would be questioning, like, why the heck are we spending trillions of dollars trying to solve this game of chess or whatever the game might be. And so that even though they know it's because we're being threatened of going extinct if we don't do it, they would still not really like it and not be very useful in that way. Like, sort of, they're rendered obsolete by technology in the same way that they could be in actual military conflict, but it's sort of like the double standard. Like, he would be questioning the programmers and the scientists who are trying to design this perfect engine to match the alien race, but then they would come back and say, well, if your military capabilities were good enough, we wouldn't have to do this in the first place. We could just fight them, or we could blow up their planet. But of course, you're too inadequate. We're too inadequate that way, so we have to do it this way. And then that'll shut the military guy up. Like, you're kind of right. We don't have the ability to fight them. So you are our only hope. But it's like he's deferring to his own ability, saying, oh, let's just do things the old-fashioned way, but you know deep down that you can't, because you're no match for them. So that'll be an internal struggle of him. The programmers are going to obviously be the most significant people in this. Sort of, can we get the algorithm and the engine to the point where it's a match for them? And there's sort of an underlying problem with that. Because again, we're using this as the technological barometer for the collective sort of ability of the species. So if you were able to make an engine that's able to beat them, that means your technology should be superior to them, which means you would be able to beat them in an armed conflict anyway, so you wouldn't feel threatened by them in the first place. So it goes without saying that people won't be able to beat them, but that's the implication, or at least what they're trying to do the whole story. So how it would end is, spoilers for the ending, is that it would actually be a draw. So they only laid out the conditions for in all human potential and ability. It shows you that we had that potential all along. We just didn't use it as well as they did because they've gotten to a level that we never got to. But under these circumstances, right, we were able to draw them. Or maybe that also shows the fact that the game is solvable, that the game itself has inherent limits because we created it with our own flawed minds. And so what ends up happening is they laid out the conditions that if you win, we'll spare you. If you lose, you'll be destroyed or enslaved, or destroyed specifically, you'll be killed. But they didn't lay out what would happen if it was a draw. So then if it's a draw, then we'll just enslave you or take over your planet and make you work for us and pay us taxes and tribute resources and stuff like that. So that's sort of like the underlying trick, like a Twilight Zone episode ending, where if you win, you're free and you're going to go out trying to make the algorithm engine the whole time. And if you lose, you're going to die. Pretty simple, eh? But they never thought, oh, it's going to be a draw because the game is solvable. The game has a finite sort of structure. So no matter how perfect your engine is, theirs is going to be just as perfect. It's going to be a draw. And they didn't tell you, oh, the condition for that is enslavement. And so on a deeper level, they probably knew that was going to happen, right? They knew you couldn't beat them because their technology is superior. So they would have nothing to worry about. It's sort of, again, like a threat assessment capability. Sort of the answer is there the whole time, but you might not realize it as the audience. That how could you possibly surpass their ability to do it? And again, they don't play the game of chess. They don't even they didn't come up with it. They're just sort of borrowing from you to sort of use your own creation to test you. And so that would be the big climactic event towards the end where the game would occur between the two technological constructs. That would be, again, our collective capability versus their collective capability represented in that simple way. And so that would be sort of the shock that it would turn into, okay, it's a draw. So what happens now? And I'm trying to think what other circumstances could happen. There could be, I've kind of lost my touch with doing these, but this one was pretty interesting. So there's a lot of those key pivotal moments, right? The arrival, where it's just him by himself, you never see anybody else. There's the sort of him mocking people, finding, being shocked by their flaws and their stupidity. You couldn't blow up the planet if you tried. He would see the sign, save the planet. And again, his demeanor would be very superior, but not hateful, because he has no reason to hate. It's like you're dealing with insects, basically, for his level. And yet, he's still mortal, he still bleeds, he could still easily be killed. Because again, separated from their technology, just like humans separated from our technology, are pretty primitive and basic creatures, right? It's the collective technology does not match the primitive individual state. So you can't really confuse the two. Each one of them would be just as pathetic and incapable as each one of us, but it's a matter of technological comparison, not individual attributes. And that's also why, again, they don't even play the game. Our greatest grandmaster, it wouldn't matter whether they played or not. It would just be a matter of letting the engine fight the engine. So what other major events would happen? After the gauntlet is thrown, everybody is thrown into a panic. Everybody's having their own internal conflicts. And again, the programmers would be the most significant that way. Again, it might make more sense if this took place 20 years ago, something like that. And so we're pushed to our potential acme, and either he's impressed or surprised or doubtful that we'll be able to live up to it. So even the fact that it's a draw would shock the ambassador, like, wow, that's very impressive. And your reward is you get to live in servitude instead of dying outright. You will be useful to us after all. That was the whole reason for the test. Which, again, might not be entirely obvious to people. They'd be wondering the whole story, like, why are they making us do this? Why are they trying to play a stupid game with us? And that is just their way of assessing sort of our capabilities and under duress, which, again, they would hold to a higher bar than us under normal circumstances, because they have such a low opinion of us. Like, oh, they've never really reached their potential, even though it's lower than what ours is. But this kind of reveals, oh, actually, our potential was the same. We just never pushed ourselves to reach it. It took them doing this to show, oh, we could have been the ones testing their capability. We could have been the one destroying their Pluto to show our power, right? It was our complacency, it was our sort of ego and laziness and whatever it might be, that our priorities were never there. So I must say I'm not too happy with text-to-speech. Let me just try to think if there's any more major plot points that would happen throughout. Sort of like we would reach seemingly our limit and then have some kind of breakthrough. I don't know what exactly that would have to do, though, with the ambassador character. He would be, again, observing, studying people, having a lot of revelations. Sort of, he will play the wiser for the audience of somebody who's teaching us all these lessons about our limitations. But in the process, also have sort of flaws and arrogance of his own. Although, again, there is no true victory over them in the whole story, because even at the end, it would be sort of one of those Twilight Zone endings where we're just kind of fooling ourselves. We knew what was going to happen all along. I'm trying to think, like, what's the scenario where we could get a moral victory over them? I guess just the fact that we were even able to draw them shows our potential is far greater than they would have thought, right? There was no chance of us possibly winning. It's like a rigged game. Since the game is solvable and has a finite number of scenarios, they knew we couldn't possibly win. But maybe then, by the same token, they underestimated our ability to reach that point of solving it, sort of to show that they thought we would lose, not because they're better, but because we're worse. That would be the implication, because of course they're perfect, so you can't be better than perfect. And just trying to think, like, after that, it would basically just be, again, like the arms race. It's almost like a Cold War thing where it's a technological race. It's not actually armed conflict. There is no armed conflict. Nobody dies. Again, you don't even see another one of their kind. It's just them. And that kind of leads to sort of the suspense, or you can kind of imagine something better, which is very Signs-like, where you see how many aliens do you really see in Signs? You see their ships for a second, you see the one at the birthday party in like Mexico or wherever on TV, and then you see the one in the kitchen, the pantry, and then the one at the end, like, which is the same one, trying to get revenge or do whatever it's trying to do. And I think that's it. There is no other one you kind of see one messing around in the cornfields and crops and stuff a couple times, where he sees like his leg poking out, or you see the one on the roof. It could be the same one the whole time. I guess they never really established that. But, when the officer chick is saying, oh, I know some girls who could Olympic pole vault higher than that, ha ha ha, or whatever it is. So that's the same one that they're talking about, who is up on the roof. So yeah, I would have kind of that claustrophobic environment of people struggling with their inner limitations to try and push themselves to solve this. And what other major events could happen? Try to think of a few more. Those two scenes are kind of minor, like the paper cut possibility, or something would happen that would show his mortality, and yet you still can't touch him because of the underlying threat behind him. What other major event could happen? See, this is the drawback of not really doing like a thorough write-up before, or even taking any notes. I just try to improvise, like, what would be an interesting story point as there's, okay, so we're at that sort of fourth act where it's the arms race. We're trying to struggle to sort of come up with the answer. Some countries won't want to work together. They'll try to beat each other to the race, the same way, like, like Russia and the US trying to race who's the first to get to the moon, or, stuff like that. So there'll be a certain pride in that. And then eventually they'll relent and have to work together because they realize, oh, there's only one day left and we're all going to die because we can't solve it. Or at least we know that there's more to be solved. Like, oh, we still haven't reached the limit or the potential that we can sense. Like, oh, this move is still imperfect. This is still missing something. So you could transpose it like that. It's sort of, they have to overcome their differences and their egos and their desire to prove something, and just go pure meritocracy, pure ability, which is, again, something the GM character would be pissed about. Like, he has to just accept his limits. Like, no matter how good I am, I'll never be good enough to be useful here. That's why chess is used so much in fiction, like as a either symbol of intelligence, or like Code Geass, where they're always playing it, and it is kind of stupid how they use it there. But like the game of war is like the game of chess, and all these different analogies. It might be overused, actually, honestly, but sometimes it can be used well. And I like that sort of game within the game from the Seventh Seal, where the real game, or at least part of the game, isn't just them playing on the board. It's what they do outside of it to sort of, trick each other or figure out their next move and things like that, predict their strategy. So yeah, there would be that element too, like kind of where we have some amount of contact capability with them. And so that's so they can continue to scare us and tell us what to do to keep us in line and keep the potential going. But we would so they would be probing us for sort of what is their real potential? What is our real use to them? But we would be probing them, pretending like, oh, so we need to make sure we know your customs better so that we don't offend you as we're playing this game, or things like that. But really, we're trying to just figure out more about them so that we know what their motivation is, like why are they trying to do this, and also how powerful are they really. Maybe we can probe for a weakness, despite obviously knowing we're no match for them. We can at least try. We have nothing to lose, basically. It's a lose-lose situation, but nobody wants to acknowledge it. I think that's good. Let me try to think of one more major event that could happen. So you're working on the algorithm, you hit a wall, then you have to overcome some differences, work together, and still that's not enough. So what would be the final breaking point that would sort of like something about the ambassador's behavior, the observer becomes the observed moment, where something in his behavior would give us the final clue that we would need to finish the engine. So it would be like, what could he do? He would do it inadvertently, not trying to help us, of course, and that sort of taints the integrity of the experiment. But what would he be? What would he do? He could he would say something to himself, like mocking people and sort of, oh, how can they be so short-sighted, or how can they be so stupid about some tendency that somebody displays? Like, they'll never be able to do it. But in that same moment, what would be something that would give people a clue of sort of their greater wisdom that then they would apply? I don't know. It's a hard it's a hard moment. That would be like the pivotal final straw, and he would never know that that was why they came to it. So he could see like the programmers working on it in their final hours and sort of mocking their failure, like, oh, that's never going to be good enough to beat us. And it's hard to, I used to be better at thinking of things on the spot. So he's looking over them, sort of, he was free to observe the planet throughout, so he'll keep seeing things that'll evoke certain reactions and lessons from him, like the save the earth sign. But here, now since he knows the time's almost up, like the week is almost up, he's going to sit there and watch them in their last moments. So they feel the pressure kind of literally staring them behind their backs, and sort of they're getting nervous, it's hurting their performance, or they feel threatened, they're scared, they're getting all emotional, all things that the engine wouldn't do, that removes all their flaws. That's why that's the pure measure. Because one moment a person could do something perfectly, one moment they can mess up. Whereas in a technological sense, it's always the same, sort of robotic and perfect and seamless. The only flaws with it would be the flaws that you programmed into it. So I can't believe how bad this speech to text actually is. I'm kind of disappointed. But this is the right way to do it. So that even though it's writing, I'm not actually writing it. I'd rather just, because then it takes too long and I have to slow down, and now I don't even have to worry about it except for the inaccuracy of it. So again, last point, what action would this guy take to sort of inadvertently reveal to us the secret to our own flaws? Yeah, I should make this a daily thing where I do these, and that's kind of what I wanted to do, but I only like to do it when I start early, so I don't feel like it's at the expense of something else. It's like one of those premise pictures that even though it seems stupid, it seems like something that could be made like into a movie. And the problem is that they would get stuck on the premise. Like, it would just be, it's a cool idea, but how do you actually fill it in with substantial moments and interesting characters and stuff like that? Especially since, again, it's not really about the alien race, it's about people. The same way like Signs is not really about, that's why that's the weakest part that had the least amount of thought put into it, was the aliens themselves. It's not really about that. It's about Mel Gibson's test with faith, and how he sort of regains his faith through these events and all that kind of stuff. It's not really about the external force. That's just a means to sort of test the characters and push them and serve as like a catalyst for everything that happens in the story. I'm really struggling to think of what is a good way to display sort of like they reach a breakthrough and then they hit a wall for the final time. So they can't figure out how to make like the perfect algorithm to solve this. And of course the GM is in despair. He's not even invited to be there or anything, right? So he could really feel inadequate. It's like the Salieri Amadeus thing, where you might think, oh, you're the best in the world at it, but you still feel inadequate because now you're realizing point blank, bold face, like, I dedicated my whole life to this and yet I'm still useless in the most important moment. I can't do anything because my human abilities are never going to measure up to technology's capabilities. That's the problem. So he would feel this sort of great longing and inadequacy even at the top of the field, because it's just not enough. It still feels so worthless. So he would be Salieri, and the engine or technology would be the Mozart, where he just can't live up to it even though he's so great and he's put his whole life and self into it. So it would go over every position, every move possible, every sequence possible to come up with doing the same thing over and over. So maybe that would be like their trump card, to do something unpredictable that only flawed people could come up with, that would force the other to do something in response. But that's kind of too basic, because that happens anyway. It's going to account for those positions too. And there could be a big thing about like who gets to be black and who gets to be white. There would have to be some big debate about that because it would be inherently unfair if they get to play as white or if we get to play as white. So how do we reconcile that? I guess we could do like a best of 3 games or something, but it is kind of billed and meant to be one game. So maybe in their arrogance, they give us white because they think, oh, ours is just superior to theirs. And that's what allows us to draw them. So it would be a combination of us being pushed to our limits with the potential acme of obviously our extinction on the line. So for the first time ever, we actually reach our potential under those circumstances in an amazing amount of time too. And their arrogance, so it'd sort of be like qualifying game theory in a believable way. Even with all that effort and potential, we still wouldn't be able to do it. It would still take them being arrogant, letting us be white, and again, also us being pushed to our limit. And I kind of wanted like a third element. What would be another thing that could qualify it that would make it more believable? Well, I guess that's good enough. So it's an interesting premise. You could totally make a premise picture out of it. Like I used to review movies, so I could say like, it's a great premise, but it's hard to fill it maybe with full, substantial features in the middle. Like what is really the meat of the story besides this guy observing everything and sort of picking. It's such a great premise. I think there's a Hindi movie that was kind of like that with Amir Khan, where he's like, he's an alien who's come to Earth and he's very disappointed in this text-to-speech. But he sort of observes, he's like the outsider looking in, and so he can pick at all our flaws and see very obvious answers that we don't see because we're too close to what's happening. That was interesting. So I'll try to come up with some of these things to do. It's maybe easier to do like with fan fiction. Like I'll come up with an alternate story or ending for something that is already an established story.